How y'all doing? For this video, I'm showing off two miniatures I painted during 2025-2026 painting session I had. These are miniatures I collected last year, more or less. And I couldn't fit these two in any of the other videos I had planned, so these are going to be in their own separate thing. That's the only thing they have related to each other. One of these are easy to find, one you can still find, even though for a while it was out of print, but I can show you where it's still available. Now, the first one is something you could quickly find in any gaming store or gaming comic book stores near your area, one that has particular miniatures. If you have a gaming store that has stocked with, miniatures of any kinds, there's usually Reaper, Games Workshop in a lot of cases, but we don't have to deal with that. And if there's any D&D miniatures or Pathfinder miniatures, this is where you're going to find it. It is Pathfinder Battles Hurlilu miniature. This is the package it came in. These are from WizKids. They're mostly assembled. May have to attach it to the base, like in this one I had to do, but you could just easily paint it right out of the package. And this is a bird demon fiend of some kind. I don't know much about him, but I just thought it was a neat looking miniature. And looking at the design of this, I was inspired by an actual bird species to paint it at. So let me show you in this little section here about all that.
This is what the miniature looks like. Again, I find the model impressive, and when I saw the design, I was inspired to paint it based on this bird. This is the red-bearded vulture, Gepetus barbatus. It's a vulture that lives around the Mediterranean, Africa, and parts of the Middle East. Like all other vultures, it's a scavenger. The most notable feature about these in the wild is the red coloring on the head and body. This is not a natural color, but a result of bathing in waters with a high iron content. Many have been spotted in the wild with little to no red coloring. In captivity, they have no coloring at all. This inspired me to attempt to paint this miniature in these colors.
And while I'm satisfied with the results that I did, I think you can agree that there are many other painters who could do a better job in attempting to paint it the way I did, so much so. Now, part of it is the sculpt of the model. The front of the chest and the legs are more smooth. They're not sculpted with feathers and all that. I should have kept that in mind, so the best I could do is just match the colors. So on the tiers, the three tiers of miniature paintings there is where the top is museum quality, the middle is tabletop, and slop and go. It's probably at somewhere of the above slop and go, yet below the top of tabletop areas, in my opinion. But I'm satisfied with it. Now on to the next miniature. So this next miniature is something I've noticed back in the 90s when I was a teen. See, I grew up in small town Oklahoma, so we didn't have a comic book gaming store or straight gaming store or a hobby store of any kind that incorporated the miniatures that I was interested in. I had to go through two ways. One, War Games West, which is a mail order catalog that you get for free. It's based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The catalog was in the same type of paper that newspapers were made out of. Black and white, tabletop role-playing games, card games when they started coming out, and of course miniatures. It had a whole slew of pictures for them. Not all of them, but a whole slew of them, so we got to see what a lot of them look like. The other option, I had to go out of town. In this case, the closest town I had that had a variety of miniatures to be interested in was Wichita, Kansas. In Hobbytown, USA, I saw this one Ral Partha 2-pack, and it was part of the Titans of Terror set. And what that was a series of miniatures, fantasy miniatures, where you had heroes pitted against these monsters that were stylized in the 50s and 60s science fiction and fantasy line. So a little Ray Harryhausen influence and all that. And if you look at those, you can see it there. Now, the Titans of Terror miniatures, you don't get them in box sets or blister packs anymore. You get them individually. You can still get them at Ral Partha, except for this one that I'm about to show you here.
This is the package I saw years ago. It was called Sargar the Lizardman and Saurian Watchdog. Despite the price of the package shown here, this was between $11 to $12 back in the 90s. This picture was taken from an eBay seller charging $30. That's not a bad price considering other sellers charge about twice the amount. However, these miniatures are not out of print. They are just not sold by Ironwind Metals anymore. They are now sold separately through Dark Sword Miniatures here. The names are changed to Lowland Lizardman and Lowland Hunting Dragon. Together they're about $25.
Here's an interesting fact about involving this miniature here. Years ago, the company FASA, famous for creator of Earth Dawn, Shadowrun, and BattleTech, it went under back in the late 80s, early 2000s, but many of the people behind that company went and formed a company called WizKids. And this was a company that first got really huge with Marvel and DC HeroClix, and nowadays are making on top of that the pre-painted miniatures like the Hurlilu Bird Fiend that I'm presenting right here. So you get a lot of your pre-painted Pathfinder and D&D miniatures today are from WizKids. But the first game that they produce conceptually is, let's have fantasy miniatures that are pre-painted, because that way you can get them right out of the box. They come in random, both the starter set and the booster pack. Random miniatures, already painted, albeit not the best job, and they have their own bases that are the click bases that they're known for, and it was generic fantasy. It was called Mage Knight. And a lot of the miniatures that they produced were adapted from Ral Partha miniatures already in the metal lines, and just readapted into the plastic lines and slightly modified here and there. And guess what one of them was? It's this very same Lizardman that's from the Titans of Terror, and it's being readapted to a Mage Knight style base. So in this case, they gave it a different pole arm there, in this case a trident. The tail used to stick out, and they made it to where it just curled around right there. But it's more or less the same miniature. As I said, they did that to many of the Ral Partha lines there for Mage Knight miniatures. Now, and of course there was miniatures specifically for Mage Knight as well, but that's another matter. So, with that fact out of the way, here is a slideshow showing before and after of these two miniatures. First will be the Hurlilu Bird Fiend, and then it'll be the Lizardman, and before and after are painted. So that's about it. Thank you all for watching. Enjoy the slideshow, and you have a nice day.